Hello, welcome. My name is Ying Lee. I am the community programming producer at the Playwrights Realm. We're really excited to welcome you today to our profile with Eliana Pipes. I'm going to start with some intro about the Playwrights Realm and then go into logistics, and then we'll start the interview. The Playwrights Realm is a value-based organization, and we center in our practice the values of being an equitable, inclusive, anti-oppressive, and anti-racist organization. These values extend to our virtual stage. If at any time you experience something that you feel does not align with these values, please feel free to email me or to send me a message in the chat. I'll put some more information about our mission and values and our email in the chat here. So connected to these values, we also recognize the additional barriers that caretakers experience. If you incur any caregiving costs while attending this interview, we'd be happy to reimburse you for those costs. This is through our Radical Parent Inclusion Project. You'll receive a follow-up email tomorrow, and there'll be a link to submit the reimbursement form. And I'll put some more information about our program in the chat. I also want to acknowledge that the Playwrights Realm is joining you today from the traditional and ceded territories of the Lenape. Colonization is an ongoing process that continues to impact the lives and lands of Native communities. In addition to the physical land that we occupy today, the platforms, technology, and equipment that we are using consume resources that are based in physical lands and are not universally accessible to all peoples and communities. If you would like to learn more about the land we occupy, I'm putting a link in the chat. We're about to start the interview, and before I do, we're just going to go over a couple logistics. We'll be doing a Q&A at the end. Feel free to submit your questions with the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen. And Zoom now offers captions. Feel free to turn those on. I'm also putting in the chat the link to the event program today, so you can learn more about Eliana and Francisco. So today, I would like to introduce you to Francisco Mendoza.
Thank you, Ying. Hi, everyone. I'm Francisco Mendoza. My pronouns are he, him. I am also joining you from the lands of the Lenape people. I'm in Manhattan. And a visual description for anyone who may need it. I am a very handsome, youthful-looking white man. I'm wearing a blue shirt, and I'm at the offices of the Playwrights Realm. I am a journalist, I'm a playwright, I'm a writer at large, and I am, as I said, the marketing manager of the Playwrights Realm, and I am exceedingly thrilled to be talking to Eliana Pipes. Come on, turn on your camera. Hello, hello.
Hello, hello, exceedingly handsome writer at large.
Listen, I gotta give people the truth. I mean, this is the objective of this interview today, is to get to the truth. Eliana, why don't you introduce yourself?
Sure, my name is Eliana Pipes. I use she, her pronouns, and I am zooming in today from the ancestral lands of the Tongva in Los Angeles.
Great. I should say, you know, when you do those disclaimers, it was like, I am reviewing a movie and the parent company. I need to give the disclaimer that we know each other very well.
We do.
We've interacted many times, so I'm so excited to be able to talk to you again in this platform. As many of you may know, Eliana is part of the Realm family. She was a Scratchpad Playwright during our last season, and we'll get to all of that fabulousness in a second. But I thought I would start early this morning. I don't know if you saw this news. I'm very much a fast food connoisseur. And I saw earlier today that Popeyes is doing a meal with Megan Thee Stallion. I don't know if you've seen this, right? So it's a trend now, you know, McDonald's had the Travis Scott, J Balvin meals, and I think Chipotle did a Shawn Mendes bowl. And so now Popeyes is doing a Megan Thee Stallion thing. And as I saw it, you know, our interview was in my mind, and I remember that when I first met you, I would read your name and I would hear it to the tune of the Popeyes jingle, you know. I would hear like, Eliana Pipes in my head. I don't know.
I love that. Wow, that's my new name now. Everyone has to sing it. It's the law.
Listen, you should lease it. As you become famous, you should like talk to Popeyes and see if you can make it happen. My first question is, when, you know, inevitably you become a superstar, to the eyes of everyone, because to some of us you already are, what would be your meal? Who would be the restaurant and what would be the meal?
Ooh, oh, that's a really interesting one. I feel like I would be some combination of like a Caesar salad and then like the greasiest piece of pizza you've ever had in your life. Like, I really appreciate the duality of like a nice salad plus a just good, yummy, like big plate of nachos or fries or something like that. So I feel like it would be like a duality plate.
I love that. I am hearing Taco Bell,
Oh,
maybe?
you know what? I could see that. I could see them being a wonderful home for my signature meal.
Exactly, the Eliana Pipes Taco Bell meal. I am going to go on a limb here and I say I believe Lil Nas X has a Taco Bell meal, so you're in great company. You know, I feel like it's a natural follow-up. Him, you, like.
That feels perfect. I love it.
I love it. I love it. Great answer. I feel like I already got to know you so well. But speaking of which, I would say, you know, as artists, we all the time have to, oh my God, Ying, thank you so much for posting the Megan Thee Stallion link in the chat. Please check it out. I will taste it this weekend. I've made it a priority to eat it. As artists, we often have to like give the blurb of who we are, you know what I mean? Like you have to choose the thing about you that makes you the most. Like Francisco's an Argentinian playwright. What's yours? What's your blurb? Who's Eliana Pipes?
Oh
What's your
well, I think Eliana Pipes is I'm a playwright, performer, and filmmaker. See, now I'm like, do we want the life story? Do we want the blurb? Do we want a little bit of both?
Right. How do you choose? You know, when you're writing your artistic statement, do you feel the need to go into your personal story or more into your like likes and passions?
I love that question. I think it's really tricky because I'm somebody who sort of like often returns to my like bio, artist statement, website blurb with a lot of stress. I think it's really evolved sort of like over the course of like writing them. And sometimes it's like, oh, should I be funny and charming? And sometimes it's like, do I need to give you a list of identities? And sometimes it's a little bit of both. But lately I've been appreciating just sort of like focusing on the work and on the synopses and things like that.
Oh, yes. I feel that so well. First of all, I feel like now you can just talk about what meal you'd be at Taco Bell. So I feel like, you know, solve that problem.
Yeah.
This idea of being boxed in the identity, isn't it tough? Because on the one hand, it feels like a leg up, like, well, I'm going to put myself in this box because this box can, you know, take me places. But on the other hand, it does feel like you, and I mean, the interview that I did an interview which you were a part of at Brooklyn Rail, and we were talking about being Latina, but then also I took, well, I wanted, who knows if it came through, to also showcase us as like human beings. Like there was a part of it that I resisted this idea of like, let's talk about Latina-ish. What's a Latina-ish? You know, it's so hard to decide.
Yeah, absolutely. There's so many sort of big umbrellas, and I think there are interesting, you know, dynamics that appear among artists when sort of like big groups are sort of lumped together, you know, like as though like Black theater is a genre or as though Latina theater is a genre, rather than being a sort of collective made up of a lot of individuals with different experiences and also different stories and different sort of like formal approaches and passions.
Exactly. And speaking of passions, because I feel that it's also part of our identities. You mentioned being, at the very least, a playwright, performer, and filmmaker. What was the is there an order there? Is there a journey from one to the other?
Yeah, a little bit. I think to do the sort of version of the life story blurb, I guess.
Go for it. Go for it.
I really came into the arts very young, really for two reasons. One of them is just my nerdy parents who met in a book club and were always sort of big appreciators of the art and of art and literature. We're the kind of household where you watch a movie and then the 45 minutes after the movie you're having a conversation about the themes and the motifs. So like they were always very encouraging of me when I sort of became interested in creative pursuits, and so I always have to credit them first. But then the other big driver behind me sort of getting into the theater specifically was nonprofit programs. I grew up during the No Child Left Behind era in American public schools, where our arts funding was getting cut and a lot of nonprofits sort of swooped in to help. I grew up in LA, and so, there were sort of all these arts advocacy organizations that cropped up and really made a huge difference for me. I grew up around the corner from the Kirk Douglas Theater in Culver City, and they would like march us in a line to go see student matinees. And, being able to get exposure to the arts so young and get involved so young, I really fell in love with it, and I felt like I had found my passion. From there, I went into acting. Acting sort of came first, like I think it does for so many people in the arts who sort of become multi-hyphenates. I was performing sort of through middle school and into high school. I went to a performing arts high school, and I started getting really serious about writing around like my junior year of high school. As I was sort of auditioning more professionally, I found myself sort of getting boxed into the kinds of roles that we often see with women of color. I was playing a silent maid. I was sort of like going out to audition for like the girlfriend over and over again, and I was like, enough of this. And I started writing really from the beginning out of an intentional effort to make more space for people like me. And from there, it just sort of spiraled. There was this sort of circuit of young playwright competitions that existed, and I hope still exists. So many things have sort of closed in the aftermath of COVID. But I sort of did this circuit of young playwrights competitions for people who were like under 18. And then I moved into the circuit of young playwrights competitions that are like for people in college, and sort of like kept writing through college, got involved with film in college, and so sort of film came third. But it's been a medium that I've really enjoyed exploring. And then from there, I went straight through from undergrad to grad school at Boston University, and now I'm sort of like popping out on the other side of that MFA.
Very much so, emerging.
Emerging.
But you're, I would say emerging and landing. So much of what you just said, I feel like I don't have any more questions prepared because I want to tackle everything you just said. The first of all is I love the idea of a little Eliana having a dramaturgical conversation with her parents after a movie. That's amazing. I remember one time my sister, like, she thought she was like burning me because she was like, you just see a movie and then you go on Wikipedia to find out more about the movie. She was like teasing me. I was like,
lovely.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. Were your parents in any way artistic themselves?
They are. It's sort of like one of those heart-wrenching things. Neither of them are sort of like professional writers, like they weren't able to sort of pursue writing professionally, but my mother is a wonderful, wonderful poet. I have some of her chapbooks like over there in the corner. They're fabulous. But yeah, she's a fabulous, fabulous poet and a creative writer. And they're both sort of like, yeah, they are lovers of the arts.
Suffice to say that they are probably very happy with where you're at right now?
They are. I got really lucky, I think, to have parents who were sort of like open to the creative path. I know that that's a really hard thing for so many people, and I consider myself really, really lucky to have been able to sort of jump that hurdle. Oh, really?
Engineers, both of them.
Oh, oh, double engineers, my God.
Double engineer. There's an artistic bent there, of course. Both of them have like an artistic sensitivity, but it can be a little like, I won this prize. Like, that's good. I love that for you. That's amazing. And I love that your mom has like checkbooks, and it's like, wow, that's wonderful. And then you were talking about sort of getting into the arts through these programs. That can be such a tricky relationship. I mean, nonprofits, I do believe they're another side of the coin of capitalism in a certain way. How was that experience? What were they looking for exactly? Like, what was it that drew you to that? Was it just like, well, someone's offering it, or was there a particular incentive?
Yeah, a lot of it was just sort of like someone's offering it. The sort of youngest programs or like the ones that came in sort of like elementary school were things that you were sort of like selected for. I was in the after school care program because both my parents worked full time, and so they were like, oh shoot, we got all these kids hanging around, like let's put them in a different room or something. And so like it was sort of tacked onto the after school program. And then some of them were sort of voluntary. One of the programs I did with the Actors Gang Theater in Culver City was like every day after school in middle school. So I would like march myself from my school to this theater every day. So a lot of it did come from sort of like vocation early on, but I really like what you said about how, yes, nonprofits are sort of like part of that, you know, big machine of capitalism. I think that, you know, over the course of my career, and especially, you know, where I landed now, I've sort of like interacted with a lot of nonprofits, and it's true that there's a big sort of spectrum of I loved what Ying said at the beginning, sort of like values-oriented organizations versus organizations that have sort of different kinds of motivations. And I've also been able to, thankfully, kind of stick around with some of those nonprofits. The biggest, and actually the first one that ever came to my school in the fourth grade, was called Young Storytellers. It's a creative empowerment program that centers on one-on-one mentorship. And I actually like became an intern for the offices when I was in college. And then I started a version of the program also in college. So like I created a chapter in Harlem, and this year I'm joining the board. So
Wow.
yeah, it's really nuts, but like, you know, it's
Because I was gonna say, like, if they know what they're doing, they are chasing you down and putting you in their brochure as a success case of the program. But even that feels a little icky, like, oh, like, you know, gotta sell more. It's not sell, but you know what I mean.
yeah, I mean, it's a really interesting dynamic about sort of like, you know, when like things can tip into tokenism, and it's tricky, but it's been really interesting now to be at the point where I'm sort of like having more agency and being part of leadership for these organizations and thinking about, you know, what were those issues when I was a student, and how can we redirect?
Right, right. And I love that you're taking an active hand on that. It can feel, because of scarcity, that there's just not a lot of yeses. And I love this idea of like, well, if I've jumped the barrier, then how can they be that yes for another person as well? I mean, and you know, it's also a lot of work. So I love that you're like, you know, taking the time to do that. I mean, I don't know how much being a board member takes up your time, but I imagine it's a commitment.
Yeah, I'm sort of still learning. This is like my first month on the board, but it's certainly been interesting so far. And like, you know, like you said, it's sort of one thing to think in the abstract about what we want our institutions to do, and it's a really different one to suddenly find yourself in the driver's seat having to come up with solutions.
Right.
It's great to
Right.
sort of think about that and engage with those questions with more agency.
And it also makes me think about, like, as an artist, because you're also interacting with institutions, not necessarily from a position of power, but rather someone comes along and says, like, Eliana, I love your play and I want to produce it, or I want to. How do you negotiate? Now, well, you're still a normal because you're about to not be. I firmly believe that. But how do you negotiate even that power, even that specific positional power? Say, associating your name with a big theater that's going to produce a play. Is there anything to share with us in terms? And I'm literally mean me, because I do have that question in terms of like, how do you find your power in that situation where it doesn't really necessarily feel like you have any?
Oh my gosh, I love that question. I wish there was like a third panelist who could answer it for both of us. I think it's something of
You also have that question.
like, and I think it's probably going to be one of those ongoing things, sort of like as you get to each new level, it's like, ooh, there are a whole new set of problems up here, and like things look different from up here, and it's been interesting sort of navigating when and where and how I am able to sort of like exercise my power and make requests and things like that. I think it's been something that I've been really learning, especially over the course of the last couple of months, about, you know, when decisions are actually up to me. And I think that I was at the beginning really sort of unaccustomed to actually having agency, even over my own work, because, you know, there are so many situations where, you know, everyone is so sort of like spread thin in the theater. We have so many people doing multiple roles, especially at smaller institutions, and it feels like an imposition to ask for anything. But, you know, more and more I've been realizing when I really can put my foot down, and when I have the power to ask for resources, so much of what I found is like typing things into the text of the play, because things
Right.
are taken more seriously when it's in the text of the play. So especially when it comes to like a sort of a particular thing around casting, I've noticed that sometimes when I say things in a verbal conversation with somebody, I won't end up with the kind of actor that I hoped for. But when you type it into the cover page, like the actor who's miscast gets it and knows themselves, like there's a little more course correcting that can happen. Like it's definitely, there have been a lot of new lessons, but I think one of the biggest ones have been that the sort of the text of the play is king in a way that I don't think I realized at the beginning.
Oh, wow. That's amazing. It makes me think of a conversation that we had a while ago that shall remain detailless because, we want to keep working in this industry. But we had a conversation a while ago where I was asking you for advice about how do you choose your directors? How can you make sure that like that choice is respected? And damn, that can be very hard to do. I love the idea of like just codify it in the play. And
I think that's been the most helpful thing for me is being able to sort of codify it in the play. But yeah, I do think that it's such a tricky thing. I think that another sort of strange dynamic for artists is that we're constantly sort of bopping from institution to institution. And so, when you spend a long time with one place, you have the opportunity to sort of engage, to give feedback, to sort of grow with the organization, to correct mistakes. But if you have 29 hours in a
right.
building, it's really hard to like figure out the workplace culture that you're even stepping into, and then to adapt to it, and then adapt again. Like really tricky. And I think it speaks so much to the way that artists have to build community with each other, because so often it's like, oh, I just got a thing with this theater. I know my friend worked at that theater. I'll ask her how that went, and then maybe I'll know how to prepare for this. Like the sort of intra-community networking, I think, becomes so important.
Right. It is so exact. I was going to say exactly that. Which brings me to something else that you said about writing sort of the roles. I'm twisting your words a little bit here, so stop me. But writing the roles that you would like to be able to play, like, and that there's this like, well, I am playing these roles that just do not give me the room that I need, that are even to some degree offensive to me. And sort of writing the stories that would allow you, I don't know that you've acted in your own place, but that someone like me could then go ahead and do this role. And so I wanted to go into your experience with the realm, and I will say that's a story for me may begin at a different place than it does for you. Because to me, it was like I got to know your work through the realm as like someone who went to do coverage on a play of yours. But what was your story with the realm?
Oh my gosh, the Playwrights Realm was an organization that was sort of like I mentioned, because I came to playwriting like truly as a 16-year-old. The Playwrights Realm was something that was sort of like always on my vision board. Like I started the organization like 7 years before I ever professionally interacted with you all. So like, it had been a space I had always sort of been aware of. I actually think, and this is so embarrassing, but I'm pretty sure that I applied like in my senior year of high school. Don't look back through the archive, but I was always sort of like had my eye on the theater. And then I applied with a play that was my thesis play, a play about Lorena Bobbitt. And it thankfully got through to Scratchpad. And I think I found out that I got Scratchpad like a month into the pandemic. So yeah, like my entire realm experience was virtual, which I was initially so sort of like nervous about. I think that, the pandemic has been really hard in a lot of ways for everybody, but this sort of air being taken out of the theater was really rough. And at first I was nervous, like, oh man, like another virtual thing, but it ended up really being such an incredible experience. And something that I uniquely appreciated about what the realm does is, like we were talking about, that effort to build connections between artists and to build community among artists. I went to so many of like the realm's happy hours and mixers with directors and town halls, and having the opportunity to meet other artists and commiserate with other artists and be uplifted by other artists, and to be able to sort of talk with a group of people who were trying to figure out in real time what to do with all of this. It was
Right.
really, really wonderful. And I think there's some sort of mythology around artists, and particularly around writers, of this sort of like lone wolf thing. And It makes sense. Like only one person can type into a script at a time. Or well, but you know what I mean. Like
I know, I do.
it's true that in some ways it's a solo venture. And I think that for a long time that meant that I sort of neglected how important community is for just the sustaining of any passion. And so I've really, really appreciated the way that the realm has fostered community. I've met so many friends that I've like then come to know in real life, who I met for the first time like on a Zoom screen in a realm mixer.
Right,
And I haven't
right.
even talked about how great the actual Scratchpad workshop was yet. It was also amazing, but like the sort of
We'll get
auxiliary.
to it. We'll get to
True, true,
it.
true. But yeah, the auxiliary stuff that came with being involved with the realm was also just really special.
It was such I remember I now as you were talking, I was like, I actually do remember it was my friend Christopher. He sent me this link to a show at AnFest, which is the Ars Nova Festival. And you know, hashtag support all things Latino. He was like, should we go to this show? And I was like, sure, whatever. But then I remember I was like, I told the realm, like, because I believe there was a charge to go. And so I told the realm, like, hey, can you pay for my ticket? Because I'm going to go. It's like a realm official. But to me, it was like, I'm just having fun. And then I went to see a show. It wasn't Lorena. It was Dream House, a different play of yours. And I remember I was just like blown away by it. It was so smart, but also I have to say I have like a little bit of a rejection to the like actor, like yeah, so you know, people snapping. I'm like, yeah, but I want to be challenged, and that play challenged me in a very unexpected way, sort of tackling a little bit of the self-hate that we have inside that's been given to us about our identities. And I was like, oof, that really hit me. So I remember I came back to the room and I was like, stop. There's this woman. We need to work with her. And I believe you did in Dream House. So it ended up being some sort of finalist or semi-finalist. And then I remember Alexis hitting me up and being like, she's applied again. And this is the play. And it was Lorena. And it was just at the time when I had seen the Amazon documentary about Lorena Bobbitt. So I was like, whoa, this woman keeps popping, Lorena Bobbitt. And I read the play. And again, there was something about it that just didn't settle for the, here's the story. But it sort of looped back around to, there's no way to leave it without having been challenged in a certain way. So I was so excited that we were going to get to workshop it. Can you tell us a little bit about Lorena? Like, what's it about?
Sure. First, I just want to say thank you so much. I really appreciate what you said about that sort of like challenging thing. Like something that's really important to me as an artist is that challenging component. I sort of take every next play as an opportunity to challenge myself. Like Lorena was a challenge on so many levels, mostly just like scale. That's the biggest thing I've ever written. In so many ways, it's like the scariest thing I've ever written. And so to know that sort of like spirit of challenging oneself in this sort of like direction of growth is coming through to the audience, that means a lot. So thank you. Lorena is about the sort of media hailstorm around the case of Lorena Bobbitt, who you may or may not have heard of, depending on a lot of things. But Lorena Bobbitt became famous in 1993 in the sort of tabloid scene because she chopped off her husband's penis with a kitchen knife. And it later came out in the trials that he was incredibly physically and sexually abusive, and it became this sort of flashpoint in conversations about domestic violence in America at that time. And being 1993, it was just a circus. And so in the play, there's a playwright character who's sort of trying to tell the story from the lens of 2020, trying to tell it the right way, and also trying to sort of protect Lorena from the sort of story that's spinning out of her control. And it kind of goes wild from there.
Right. I do remember, because again, I had just seen the documentary, and there's been a resurgence about those narratives. I'm thinking specifically that right now I'm watching Impeachment, the FX show.
Yeah,
and
I, Tanya.
Right, I, Tanya, The People versus O.J. Simpson. There's a lot of like the media circus reconsider has become a genre. But what I loved about because a lot of those can just be painstaking reconstructions, and the the sort of tone comes from you. Just like literally the episode yesterday from impeachment, they just show the coverage of the Monica Lewinsky scandal. They don't need to add commentary. It's awful. But what I loved about your play is that it was also very stylistic, even from the inclusion and particularly focused around the inclusion of the playwright character, that there's a theatricality to it that goes beyond just the facts, right? And maybe I'm interpreting here, but you said I want to challenge myself, and I did feel that it wasn't just like, here's the facts, you make a call. There was also, you kind of were guiding us through the journey.
Oh, thank you. I really appreciate that. I think, when it comes to the question that you asked earlier, that like, who's Eliana? I think I'm a really spectacle-driven writer. I love big theatricality. It's sort of like my favorite thing that happens in the theater. And so, like playing with the scale of having all those people, it's a vignette play, so it moves really fast, and there's all these sort of moving parts. Lorena is a sort of like Greek play, so there's a Greek chorus who plays sort of like the audience of 1993, but also the audience of today. And sort of grappling with all those moving parts was something I was really excited by. And yeah, that challenge thing, I found throughout my portfolio that in grad school I wrote 6 plays in 2 years. It was a lot. But my approach there, I think, has really sort of characterized my approach overall, which is just to sort of like keep finding the thing that I'm the most afraid of doing, or the thing that seems like the hardest thing in the world to do, and to try to do it. Like I wrote Lorena, and then the very next thing that I wrote Lorena, this massive sprawling epic vignette play, and then the next thing I wrote was this like naturalistic 2-hander. And then the thing I wrote after that was this like huge musical. Like I
Right.
keep going in some challenging direction. I can't rest.
Right. No, and I think that's, I believe that's the way it should go. And you said earlier, which I agree, sometimes it's just 29 hours. But I wonder what those 29 hours looked like at the Playwrights Realm, in terms particularly from what it did to the play itself.
Yeah, oh my gosh. The to speak about the actual developmental support at the Playwrights Realm, it was such a wonderful and really caring process. We got to have conversations with Alexis Williams and talking sort of through pieces of the play for months. And so I had been doing sort of like tweaking revisions for sort of months and months and months before the workshop even started, just sort of like one-on-one with that dramaturgical support. And then I was paired with the incredible Taylor Reynolds, who was such a joy to work with. And we got to have even more conversations about the play. I feel like the sort of like time outside of those 29 hours was really characterized by rich conversations dramaturgically with the sort of directors and the ADs. And we got to hone in on a couple of things really to sort of find the spine of the play. I think the challenge with the big vignette play that has so many characters and scenes, that's trying to sort of tackle so many subjects, is like, how do you find the spine that carries the story through? Like, how do you figure out how to earn an audience's attention as you're bombarding them with all of this stuff? And I think we really found that spine in the relationship between Lorena and the playwright, and how it sort of developed over the course of the piece. And so we had an incredible group of actors who I miss every day. And we really got to sort of like focus in on those scenes where we watched the playwright's play falling apart and develop them. And honestly, the sort of, it was like a big series of dramaturgical gifts. First dramaturgical gifts from Alexis, then dramaturgical gifts from Taylor, and then so many from the actors. And the version of the play that I walked out with was so different from what I came in with. Like there were scenes changed, and there was like a lot of sort of differences on the page if you were sort of like to highlight everything that was new typed during that week, but also just in the way that I was thinking about the play and conceptualizing the play. It was like everything finally clicked into place.
Right. I realized that I was making a surprise face, and then I was like, why am I surprised? I actually saw that workshop. I do know that is the case. Like, wow, very different. I was like, yes, I read it before and I saw it, so I'm not surprised. I actually did experience it. And just out of curiosity, that was a closed workshop, so I wonder, have you ever gotten the chance to see it with an audience?
Yes, actually, literally last week. So this.
Oh wow, where was it?
So this play was actually, it was my thesis play in grad school, which meant that I got sort of like 6 months of online development in lieu of a thesis production. But very, very generously, the Boston Playwrights Theater, which houses the BU MFA playwriting program, agreed to produce our thesis plays after we've graduated. So it was sort of like my posthumous BU thesis. And so it was like literally last week, like full production sets, memorized actors, 19-year-old actors who were very good. And yeah, I got a university workshop production like literally last week. I got to see it like with a full house.
That's amazing. Like in person. Well, if
Yeah.
you had told me, I would have maybe gone to Boston. So thank you for not telling me, because that would have
I'm
been
sorry.
like
Yeah, no, I messed up. I messed up.
No, I'm just saying I actually would have derailed my schedule a lot. So I'm glad.
Well, then you're welcome. You're welcome. But you can check out the production photos. We had a 40-foot bright yellow set.
Oh yes. Oh, I love that. Which brings me to, we've talked about the realm, we've earned them their money that they're paying us. So now let's move on. Let's talk about Dream House, which I would love for you to tell us a little bit more about. And then I want to talk about the journey, because that play feels, again, I'm saying something that you may disagree with, but it does feel a little bit like your calling card play. Like it's been so successful, it's gone in so many things. So by now, I don't even know how you feel about it. So tell us a little bit about what it is.
Yeah, sure. Dream House follows two Latina sisters who inherit their family home after their mother passes away, and they decide to sell it on an HGTV style reality TV show. So the house is in this sort of changing neighborhood. It's in a gentrifying area, and they're sort of trying to cash out on the way that the neighborhood is changing on TV. And the show sort of takes this surreal left turn. One sister is sort of like tied up with the past, the other sister is sort of obsessed with the future. And, you know, it's a play that's interested in sort of big questions about culture and capitalism and if cashing in is the same as selling out.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I, because when you read the blurb, I'm speaking purely from a personal experience here. I think my fear going in to see the play, it was that it was going to say gentrification is bad, and it is bad. But I'm like, yeah, but I know that. I've read the newspapers. I don't know that I need to spend 90 minutes in the theater to learn that all over again. And it does, but then it sort of turns it around. I remember it made me think about something that I don't believe it was built in because my experience is unique to me, but it did make me think about growing up outside America, but in general giving preference to American culture. So oh, you don't watch Argentina movies, you want American movies are the good ones, so national sucks, or giving preference, and we all spoke English, or we had to learn English if you want to succeed in your career. But there was this thing where you sometimes are eagerly part of the process. And the accountability that your play called its characters to, I was just mesmerized by that. I was like, wow, this does not go where I thought it was gonna go. So I'm insanely happy that it's getting so much attention. So what are some highlights in the journey of the play?
I really appreciate what you said about sort of like going beyond the like, this is bad, this is good, these are bad, these are good. Like I think that the sort of driving inspiration behind the play for me really also sort of comes out of personal experience. I grew up in a little pocket of Los Angeles that was really changing as I grew up. And when I was 13, my family sold our house. We sort of profited from the way that the neighborhood was changing. And in so many ways, that moment was so good for my family and our financial health. We could afford things that we couldn't afford before. But on the other hand, that move really constituted a kind of cultural loss that I didn't understand at the time. I was going to a different kind of high school with different kind of demographics, and it forced me into this new experience of what it felt like to be in a space that was mine. And thinking about sort of like the way that upward mobility has manifested over the course of my life, and like when you're on your way to the top, do you take your culture with you, yes or no? Like a lot of those questions are really things that I was worried about and that I was going through. And the other big inspiration behind the play was that as I was moving into this sort of professional spaces as a playwright, where there is this sort of like dynamic where on one hand the audiences are mostly white, statistically, demographically in subscriber bases in American theater, and there's this market for diverse storytelling, I sort of felt like I was being asked to sell my trauma for money. And I wanted the money. And I wanted the recognition. And I wanted to be in those spaces. And it was a tricky thing to square. And so that thing of like, how can I challenge myself formally with this next play? I also always think like, well, what in this play is challenging me as a person? Like, is it making me rethink my decisions? Is it making me grow? And so a lot of what's in that play really comes out of me grappling with sort of like my role in the theater and where I want to place myself and where I want to keep going.
And I want to, just before we move on to the like actual production, I want to say, because I was thinking about this when I was taking a shower. I was thinking that I've seen 3 plays of yours by now. Dream House, Lorena, and I saw Unfuckable at the Dramatics Guild. They did a beautiful films production, and they have, as you said, they are such different styles. They have very little in common in terms of what they're doing. They're all exploring different universes, but I did think they all center protagonists who question how much other people's pains are responsible for their current situation. They do have these moments, this very poignant moments of the characters stopping and saying, is my being here costing someone else something? I don't know if that's on purpose, but it does seem to, you do seem to very honestly grapple with it as you're writing, because they all have this like protagonists who are like, I am almost, I don't know if this word fits, but haunted by these other people, by Lorena Bobbitt, by my mother, by the Aztecs. You know what I mean? Like they're all sort of haunting the person. And I wonder if that reflects a personal grappling that you have.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, I love that. That's such a thank you so much for like reflecting that back to me. That's something that I had never, if you had asked me that, I would never have pieced it together in that way, but it feels so right. Thank you. Like, I do think that that's certainly a component. Like, I think like there's so much sort of engagement with identity in my work and like the way that I've sort of explored my identity over the course of time and the way that it's sort of like emerged in the characters. I'm Black, white, and Puerto Rican, and so that sort of like haunting component of having sort of like accountabilities and personal history and family history across all of those communities, like all of the sort of like tangled backgrounds there, and trying to figure out like in this modern American landscape, like who am I and where do I go? Like I feel like a lot of those questions and the sort of like way that the history bears on to today and bears on to each of us as individuals and where we go from here, like those are all questions that I'm always really concerned with and interested in knowing more about. And I do think that sort of like historical haunting thing and the like, what is it costing for me to be where I am question, yeah, it's something I'm really interested in.
Right. It's like, I'm gonna cash in, but I don't wanna. Did you happen to see Celine Song's Endings?
I did. I love that play. I'm sorry for screaming. I saw it in Boston and it was incredible at the AR.
Me too. I love that production. And actually, now that I think about it, Celine is a former fellow of the Playwrights Realm. So Realm fam.
And in the Realm family with Celine.
In case people haven't watched that play, it is just insanely smart. It begins as this story about this Korean fisherwoman, and then it sort of like interrupts itself, and it's like, no, I take it back. And it's like, what is happening? There's this. It reminded me of what we said in the beginning. There's this box. I could benefit from being in the box, but then I'm in the box, and then I'm trapped inside that box. Such an interesting reflection, and yet, sort of as a self-fulfilling prophecy, Dream House has been very successful.
Yeah. And I'm so thankful. Like I'm really excited. And it's been really interesting. I think so much changed over the course of the pandemic, but also I think the way that theaters were thinking about doing their programming and the way that like, a lot of theaters I think had reckonings, a lot of institutions had reckonings over the course of this past year. And I'm really honored and excited to be part of the sort of like next wave of whatever is coming.
Right. And how specifically, so I guess I should mention, just to give this context, Dream House is about to have a world premiere, and it's happening in a co-production with 3 different regional theaters. It's the Alliance in Atlanta, Long Wharf at New Haven, and Center Stage in Baltimore. And I wonder how that came together. I don't wonder because I know, but I feel like people would wonder, and so I'm asking.
I would just speak more about it. So the sort of inception of all of this was that I applied to the Alliance Candida Prize, which is wonderful. If you're a playwright in grad school, I highly suggest applying. It's a prize that's open to people who are in their 3rd year of grad school. So a sort of like, or their final year of grad school, a sort of like interesting group of selection, but it won the Alliance Candida Prize, and part of the prize is getting a production at the Woodruff Art Center, which is so exciting. And so like I found out about that production, and that was how the play sort of initially moved to the stage of production from the sort of like festival development circuit that it had been in for quite some time. And then Long Wharf Theater had done a reading of the play as part of their new work series, I think at the end of 2020, in December 2020. And
Right.
so when they sort of like heard about that production, they were interested in getting involved, and Baltimore Center Stage had the same feeling. And so they all had a conversation that I didn't know about. And then this happy news came to me finally.
Right,
And
right.
now
I
it's
love
become a
that.
sort of traveling triple co-production. So the production will sort of like start in Alliance and then move consecutively to each of those two theaters over the course of the first quarter of 2022.
Right. And what stage is it in now?
Right now we're in designing.
Oh,
Yeah, it's been so cool. Like I mentioned, the play is really about the house and the sisters selling the house. And so the house is a huge part of how the story unfolds. And it's been so exciting to finally get to thinking about it in three-dimensional space and thinking about what that house is going to look like and how. It's really thrilling.
that's it, right. You just said, well, it was in the circuit of festivals and readings. That could be a little like 2D, and now you're going to 3D. Is it impacting? Is it just seeing it come to life, or is it impacting the writing itself, where you're like, oh, I just fine tuned this to this, and now I gotta.
I love that you said that. It actually really absolutely is impacting the writing. Something that I realized is that, because the play was moving through this sort of like festival development circuit for so long, there were a lot of things in the play that I had tailored to music stands, like that I had tailored to the idea of a music stand reading, that were sort of like not relevant in the three-dimensional production, or things that would exist on stage that I was neglecting because of music stands. The quickest example that comes to mind is the crew. There's a camera crew slash sort of like a demolition crew in the house that sort of like swarms around and takes care of things. And because I had only ever developed the play with those music stand readings, we only ever had those three central actors, the two sisters and the host of the TV show. We had never had an actual crew to play with outside of that Antfest production that you saw. And so now, all of a sudden, getting to have these new conversations about how the crew will actually work in physical space, and possibilities for how we could sort of explore movement, and like, oh gosh, do they have choreography? Is it dance-like? Are they menacing? Like, thinking about all the sort of new storytelling tools that are available now that it's going to be a three-dimensional production and not just like music stands.
Are you the sort of playwright who shows up to the rehearsal and just wants to keep playing with it?
Well, it's so funny because this is my first production. I think I'm sort of still figuring out what kind of playwright I am.
Right.
But I'll certainly be there. I'm going to make an effort to make all my revisions ahead of time, just for the sake of not giving everyone an aneurysm, myself included. But yeah, I'm definitely going to be there. And especially having three productions, I think there are opportunities for the play to sort of evolve as it moves through those versions. And yeah, I honestly have no idea what it'll have, but I'm excited to find out.
So are we. Okay, I am going to move into final round. If people want to submit their questions, please do. I know I have my own. And so I'm going to take advantage of the time. But if you do have any questions, please submit them through the Q&A, and we will get to them in the next 10, 15 minutes. So I'm going to start with one of my own, which is, you mentioned that you did go to a graduate program. Graduate programs are a topic. They are a topic, and there are many opinions about them. And I wonder what was behind that decision, and how do you feel that became part of your journey?
Yeah, I think that is such a beautifully diplomatic way to put it. A topic. They are indeed a topic. I think, yeah, grad school is so complicated, and it's certainly not right for everybody. I think it was definitely right for me. And a big thing that I just want everyone in the world to know is that there are a circuit of fully funded graduate playwriting programs that exist in the U.S. I think grad school.
Do not pay for grad school.
Yeah, I think that's the implicit message. Thank you for turning my subtext into paratext. Like, I think that it's really. I think that those fully funded programs are really, really valuable. I think that it's really, I got the advice really early on at 16 from Lisa Pearl. Thank you, Lisa Pearl, who spoke at like a summer program that I did, to not go into debt as an artist. I think it's really valuable to be able, if possible, to avoid carrying debt. First of all, because I think that it would actually really change the writing. Like, I think that if I had been taking on debt for a grad program, I wouldn't have been able to write 6 wacky plays that took so many risks. I think I would have been more sort of practical, or more focused on what I thought would make money. I don't think I would have felt as free creatively if I had been paying.
You'd be like two-handers about, you know what I mean? Like,
exactly.
Keep it producible.
Exactly, and especially because my aesthetic is so like big and theatrical and sprawling, I never would have found that, I think, if I was focused on doing like things that would be able to be producible and sellable. And yeah, I think that grad school was a really wonderful experience, and definitely the right path for me, definitely not the right path for everyone. Free, if you can find it, is fabulous. And remembering that at the end of the day, it is about, you know, like you and the work that you do on your play, and like, teachers are helpful and all those external sources are helpful, notes are helpful, but at the end of the day, like, you have to like the play.
Absolutely, which actually connects to Gloria's question, which is, how do you find those topics? Since you were not weighed down by the pressure to be commercial, you know, gosh, where do you find all your ideas?
Yeah, I think it's so weird. It's so weird and silly. I think that a lot of it is just sort of like figuring out what's sort of like capturing you, or what's staying on your heart. When I heard Lorena Bobbitt's story, it like stuck to my ribs, and I couldn't stop thinking about her for days. And that was how I knew, like, oh, this is a play. With Dream House, like, I could not stop thinking about that house I grew up in, and like Google Mapsing through my old neighborhood and seeing how it had changed. And that was like, oh, this is a play. Something that I've been thinking about a lot lately is that, you know, I think that sometimes inspiration hits and it's huge, and it's like something just kicks the door down, and you feel so like just in the rush of this inspiration and this experience. But I also think that really often inspiration like knocks very gently at the door, and you have to be listening, or you might miss it.
It waves goodbye from a moving car.
It does, you know, I have to chase it down. Like, I especially early on in my career, I feel like I used to sort of think of inspiration as something that would either hit me or it wouldn't, and I was waiting, and I didn't have agency in that process. And lately, especially as writing is becoming sort of more of a career, and I have to do things on deadlines, and it's not up to me. Like, it's been really helpful to start thinking about, well, like, what are things that make me feel inspired, and how can I bring more of them into my life? Or, you know, how can I create the conditions for having this great idea? How can I, like, you know, make time to be quiet and have sort of like silence and space where the idea could come?
Right. And I'm going to follow up Gloria's questions with one of my own, because of something you just said made me think about that. How do you know it's a play? Because you write across mediums. So what makes you feel like an idea is suited for a specific medium?
That's such a good one. I think it's something that I'm definitely still figuring out. And some of the answer is just like make the mistake and you'll know pretty quick.
Right.
But I think that, like, for me, the sort of like, I don't tend to like the metric of like, oh, if it happens in one place, it's a play. If it happens in many places, it's a movie. I like to think of it more in terms of like, is there something to be gained by having the audience and the performers in the same space? Like, is there something in the air that everyone needs to be sharing here? I also tend to write a lot of meta theater. Like, I really like plays that acknowledge that they're plays. So that feels like a sort of clean connection to that topic. And then when it comes to something like film, I did an animation recently. Like, if being able to play with form in that digital way is exciting, if there's something that you could do with the camera to limit the perspective that you couldn't do on stage, like, I think it's more, you know, finding the like formal and stylistic opportunities that best support the story that you want to tell.
Right. It's reminding me that Machine Learning, which would be my dream house, was actually a movie first. And I did get the feedback a lot from people who read it. It's like, well, it feels like a play. There's an intimacy to it. And I remember the deciding factor for me, which really lines up with what you're saying, is like, it would be a gorgeous play. and I don't know how, but it would look like as a movie, kind of boring. And I was like, yeah, no, I see that. Like maybe we need to be odd in order for the message to land better. Okay, closing arguments. And if you want to send a question, please do, and I will tackle it. Eliana, where will you be? Give us places to stalk you. What's coming up for you?
The biggest next couple of things are the Rolling World premiere, of course, of Dream House in Atlanta, New Haven, and Baltimore Center Stage.
And what's the date for that?
January 22nd is the premiere in Atlanta, and then it's February and March for the subsequent productions, and so I will I will memorize the rest of those dates. January 22nd has been in my head since March, so it's like seared into my memory.
Well, so Ying posted the links on the, so people can.
Oh, yay! Well, the link definitely knows. Thank you, Ying. The link is definitely right. The link knows best. But those productions are upcoming. My website is just my name, so you can always find sort of what's most new with me there. And yeah.
I love it. I am so excited to see it, and excited to see you. New Haven 2022. We'll be there. Thank you so much for making the time today. It's been such a joy to reconnect with you and to talk again. And to the audience, thank you so much for making the time to watch us goof off on company time. And and there will be more. We have a class next week with C. Quintana, and that's a very popular one, so you should sign up right now. And then we have a wonderful panel talking about fundraising, philanthropy. We just talked about it in this one. And it's a serious discussion about like, what is the funder's role in the arts? So Ying just posted the link. Please check it out and sign up. And thank you so much, Eliana.
Thank you so much for having me.
It was so wonderful. Have a wonderful day. Bye.
No cigarette in the waiting room, only chairs and magazines, and a printed stack of papers that the nurse says you should read. Tell me again.